Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, May 9th. Thanks so much for joining me. Does anybody remember, first off, who I said we'd do? I can't remember, because at the end of the last show I mentioned who we'd do next week. And I can't remember, was it PMB? Or was it somebody else? Well, anyway, let's see. Let's see if anybody remembers, let me know. Because I'd hate to, I was trying to look through the list and remember who I'd said. I should have written it down or something. And I'm sure somebody remembers out there. So, because I think I might have said somebody, and then we do PMB next week. I don't know. But anyway, thanks everybody for being here. It always is such a pleasure to do the critique of the week. Let's see. I'm a little quiet. Let me turn up this volume too. Hold on. Okay, so let's see. Who do we have here? Dr. Q is here. Winston Munn, D. Coleman, Mark Grinier, Brian O'Sullivan. Oh, great to see you, Brian. Nikki Fryer is here. Patty Arbor, Steve Farrell, David Boos is here. PMB, Katie Dozier. Hey, Katie. Cindy Putnam-Guntherman is here. Morgan Feeney, Maria L. Berg, Shape of Soup. Tom Barlow, got Jesse A. Dick Westheimer in from the garden. So glad we could pull you in out of the sunshine. I'm sure you can go back after. Mary Lisa's here. Melody Bonilla, Linda Smith, Rachel Grieve. Great crew on hand. Sharon Ferrante is here. Kimberly Gibson-Tran. Clayton Clark. Desi Cochrane. Christina Newven. Let's see, Emily Arnold Fernandez, great to see you. Okay, yeah, great to see you. Yeah. Okay, well, I think it might have been Paul. Although we'll do Paul. Let me find Paul's submission here first. It might help if I type his name in. I've been adding to our decline letters the reminder that you can submit your poems to Critique of the Week. And so we've been getting a ton, and now we're back up to like 200 poems in the queue. Yeah. All right, so here's Paul Mitchell Bernstein's poems. And as always, the point of this critique is to give that workshop experience. It's so valuable. And with a great crowd, we have 51 people watching live just on YouTube alone, and a lot of likes so far already, too. Thanks a lot for that. We get 30 of those. Yeah, so make sure you do hit the like button. Thanks to whoever it was that reminded everybody off the bat. That was really nice, and it probably drew more people in. And we got some folks over on Facebook. Michael R. Evans is there. Good to see you from LA. And who knows what the hell's happening on X, but it's streaming over there too. Okay, so let's take a look at Paul Mitchell Bernstein's poems first. As always, we want to provide a feeling of what's working, what's not working, where the poem sort of veers off, where we stay engaged, where we lose interest. All those kind of considerations are what are really the most valuable. And then if we have suggestions for where to take the poem, any other things, line breaks, word choice in places, metaphors that don't work, cliches that stand out, whatever you can leave as comments is really helpful. So leave whatever comments. I'll pass along as many as I can, but often the poets are here watching too, and as Paul is. So let's take a look at Paul's poems first. Now, Paul just says, general thoughts, don't hold back. Okay. Well, we definitely love Paul's personality. Always a great guy. Definitely speaks his mind, which I appreciate. So let's speak our minds to him too. Okay, so let's take a look at this first poem from Paul. And I zoom in there. Okay, so this first poem, The Plains of Poetry. It's tragic, he said, when beauty is caught in words, a sunrise frozen in time, a flower forbidden to die. We are not the hunted. We stab at the sound of rain, swing wild at the wash of moonlight, shine at the stars, even love, whatever that is. We rein in, shut between pages of book, abandoned on a shelf. With every poem, a flake of life's mystery is lost, cast off to idle on these plains, guarded under cover, until beauty, once adored, looks foolish, feels old, longing to be let go. It's tragic, she said again, cursed to live forever on these plains, and began to cry. Beauty should be left alone to grow wild, to die. Yeah, so I really like the beginning, and I like the turn later to the she said. I think that's the best part. In the middle, I feel we get lost in a kind of philosophizing kind of mode that isn't as engaging. Arnold Fernandez says I like the enjambments. Yeah. And Nancy Snell, swing wild at the wash of moonlight. Yeah, that's a great phrase, too. And then, so the whole thing has an Ars Poetica topic, given the title, which you know right away that's going to be the case. And here, let me Trying to get my mic a little louder too. Okay, and so let's read it again a little more slowly and feel where we go through this poem. Here we go. The Plains of Poetry. It's tragic, she said, when beauty is caught in words, a sunrise frozen in time. So here already we have one thing I want to point out. It became a little bit weird, hard to read some of the punctuation because we have some enjambment that actually should have punctuation at the end of a line. Or maybe it's typos. I'm not actually sure, because if it could be, so this line tripped me up a little bit. It's tragic, she says, when beauty is caught in words, a sunrise. There should be, it's a separate clause. So I read it like it's going to continue on, and then it doesn't. So that's a little, but it could be when beauty is caught in a words sunrise. It could work it like that. So There's something a little bit wrong. I think maybe just a comma at the end of that, of line 2 would help. A sunrise frozen in time, a flower forbidden to die. And again, it's fine if you establish a way to read the poem without punctuation, and so it becomes expected and you get used to it. But we have punctuation in other places. We have a full stop period in the middle of a line here, another one here. We have a dash here, and so the punctuation makes it confusing. Morgan Fee says a colon at the end of line 2. Yeah, that would work too. Just something to block us up so we don't, because the trouble with no punctuation is you read it as if you're going to read into the next line, especially if you see other punctuation just out of the corner of your eye even. And so it feels like it's gonna just be a continuation that it's not, and that throws you off and trips you up. And I tripped up a couple times. I think I just read through the first one, but the second one where that happened, I tripped up a little bit if you go back and listen. And I think so. So again, I'd say use punctuation or don't use punctuation. Like, all that matters is consistently, but doing it consistently so we can hear and know what to expect and don't have to think about how to read the poem. So that's just one tiny note. It's really not that important, but it is something that stands out in here. Someone said, "Is this an Ars Poetica?" And yeah, it is. It's a poem about the plains of poetry. So yeah, yeah. So about the punctuation, Sharon Franti says, no, it was Jesse A. says, seems like there's punctuation inside the lines, but not at the ends. And that's mostly the case, but then we have cry and we have a dash. So it's really just inconsistent. And always, if you go through any issue of Rattle, what I try to do is make sure that the punctuation is consistent. If the poet is a poet that only uses commas to slow down the text, which a few people do, that's fine as long as they do that. If they use no punctuation, great, as long as it's consistent. But when it's not consistent is when it gets into trouble. And if it's uses standard punctuation, it should be standard because it's getting into trouble breaking that. So whatever you establish, you should continue on. And there are a few places, as Ali Rowland says, punctuation would help us know when she stops speaking too. Yeah, exactly. So we also don't know if the she is still speaking the second line, which makes it a little confusing as well. So anyway, continue. Let's start over again. The plains of poetry. Because really the punctuation stuff is so minor. I almost hate talking about it because the substance of the poetry is what matters, but the presentation is helps that substance get across. So it's equally important, but less fun. The plains of poetry. It's tragic, she said, when beauty is caught in words, a sunrise frozen in time, a flower forbidden to die. We are not the hunted. We stabbed at the sound of rain, swing wild at the wash of moonlight, shine at the stars. So to go again about the punctuation, I said we're done with it. If you used stanza breaks to represent full stops, and so you had breaks where there was a gap, that could be the establishment where you have these breaks without having to have punctuation kind of slow the poem down. So that's one thing I kept thinking here, because we are not the hunted, is a full thing. But if you had a stanza break and you separated the stuff out, then that would make the reading a little easier. Anyway, we stab at the sound of rain, swing wild at the wash of moonlight, shine at the stars. Even love, whatever that is, we rein in, shut between pages of book, abandoned on a shelf. Should it be of book or the book? One of those things, those indefinite or definite articles are really important too. Whether it's an a or a the can make a big difference. And here we have, either or missing. But yeah. All right, when love, even love, whatever that is, we rein in, shut between pages of book, abandoned on a shelf. With every poem, a flake of life's mystery is lost, cast off to idle on these plains, unguarded under cover until beauty once adored looks foolish, feels old, longing to be let go. It's tragic, she said again, cursed, to live forever on these plains, and began to cry. Beauty should be left alone, to grow wild, to die. And so I really like it is, as someone said, it's an Ars Poetica, and the argument is that we, what a poem does, as we sometimes talk about, is raise the resolution on experience. It brings into some concrete shape a feeling or emotion or a thought that was more complicated than what we have easy labels for, because so often words are just labels for experience, and a label hasn't been established, so we have a poem to get the experience across in a bigger way that we can't really just describe with a label. You can't just say, I'm sad because my heart was broken. There's so much more to that experience that's not expressed. And so the poem expresses that. And the argument here that she's making, I think the whole thing, as I'm reading it, the whole thing is what she says, which I think it would help if we made that more clear. And the punctuation can help that too. But I think she's speaking the whole time. And I think, and her argument, the speaker, or not actually the speaker, but the subject of the poem saying this, is that having the mystery not be resolved, like not having a concrete model for that feeling, you might be better off, because you lose something every time you gain, every time something is accurately expressed, you lose the mystery of that thing, which is a really fascinating concept and something to think about. So I like that aspect of the poem. Kimberly Gibson Trent says, wish I had more of a sense of the she character. Where is the speaker and this woman in the scene? In a bookstore? People watching? And that was one thing I was going to say too. So the plains of poetry is a very general description. And you could use the title to get more into the scene. Could also use, calling back to the she said. Every time, if you have two she saids in here, there's the very top and toward the end. And anytime you do that, you redirect to who's speaking. You can add a little bit of detail so we get a sense more of who the person is. And that's a possibility to play with and bring to. Anyway, so the other main comment, which no one said yet, I think the poem ends much better without this sort of summarizing last line. Beauty should be left alone, to grow wild, to die. And that line kind of summarizes the argument she was making, and it works a lot better just to end on this, I think. Ending on a detail works a lot better than ending on a summarizing line. There's just it doesn't pack the punch. And so this line could be the title of the poem, and that's a little more vivid than the plains of poetry. So maybe we could do that. But and it's a nice line on its own, but having it be the end of the poem with nothing going past that makes it feel it loses some of the punch of it. Sorry, I get allergies this time of year. I keep forgetting to take the Claritin or whatever, or buy it. Anyway, so I think a little bit more of the scene being drawn out, some punctuation to help us read the poem a little more clearly, and then a little bit of detail about the speaker, and just end here. It's tragic, she said again. So read the poem. Let's just read the end and pretend it ends there. With every poem, a flake of life's mystery is lost, cast off to idle on these plains, guarded under cover until beauty, once adored, looks foolish, feels old, longing to be let go. So this is really a great monologue. Like, I love I'm assuming that she's saying this whole thing and imagining it as this sort of complaint being uttered. There's a really nice cadence to it. There's great flow to it. And it's an interesting concept to think about. Guarded until under cover until beauty once adored looks foolish, feels old, longing to be let go. It's tragic, she said again, cursed to live forever on these plains, and began to cry. And if that was the ending, we're left with this monologue that we've been given by the she who we don't really know, but we're left to sort of wonder if there's truth and how much truth there is in that argument. And the fact that it's not really stated either way, it's left ambiguous. This is what she said, but she cries after that though. And so there's an argument, that it's a bad a bad opinion. It's a position that's making her cry, but she's saying it. And so that all is sort of hanging in the air. And that's the kind of thing when you're given something to chew on with like concrete images and ideas and thoughts, and then the what to make of it is left more ambiguous. That's the kind of thing that you like to read and reread again and think about it more. And it illuminates a sort of thought pattern that might not have been left alone. Yeah, and so that's what I think about this title. Melly Bonilla says, I like the last line as the title, beauty should be left alone. Yeah, and that could work. And all you need to add a little bit more detail to make the characters come to life if you want. And, sometimes you might just want a straight dialogue with it being sort of floating, because there's enough in the ideas and there's enough image and music in there that it holds your attention, even if you're sort of not sure who the she is. A lot of times I say we need the she. We need to know who these people are and where they are in space and things like that. But if the voice is clear enough and the details are concrete and you can really hear the speaker, then I think it's fine to leave it blank. So I think to me that's an option. If you wanted to add some detail, it'd be really easy to say, it's tragic, she said, across the table at the coffee shop. When beauty, and then go back into the quote. So you just, every time you say the she, you pull out a little more detail, and then we get to feel the scene a little different. But, yeah. Let's see, Kimberly Gibson Tran says, big words like love and beauty are a bit weak in poems, if I'm honest. Even great poets get lost in these words sometimes. Leon Lee's The Invention of the Darling suffers some from this. Yeah, I agree. Speaking of the book, is the one right here. Yeah, it is. It's hard. You have to sort of, to get those words to work. And that's what Lee does, Lee does very often successfully, is you sort of mythologize those words. And like there's a poem early on, where he uses a hummingbird. And she sort of is talking about, I think, the creative potential, maybe, is a way to describe it, as this hummingbird. So it's like, oh, hummingbird, why is the universe looking for you? Here you are, the jewel of jewels, and the universe's belly button. And he just keeps going, oh, hummingbird, like talking to this hummingbird. And that the hummingbird becomes a symbolic representation of something different than the normal. But other poems do the same thing with words like love. And I think it works when you pull it off, where love is not just love, but is a symbolic, like something different. We're talking about something deeper, and we sort of personify that and make it grow and expand. And I think that's where that works. So that's the thing to just be aware of, too. Kimberly Gibson Trent says, I like Richard Hugo's advice to not use the word love for several years, then only as a transitive verb. That's funny. Yeah. I love the clock poem too. That's actually why I asked to have him on, because we read that, I think, on the Poetry Space. Somebody suggested we read that, and I loved it, and I didn't know he had a new book. So, yeah. Yeah. Jesse A says, wondering if others feel like this poem starts and ends in the same place. Is it necessarily a bad thing? That's an interesting question for a poem like this. And to me, I think because we don't know if the speaker, if the she, is right in her conclusion, or in her supposition that she's presenting, then I think it works, because the mystery itself of whether or not she's right becomes the motion in the poem. There's a kind of haiku. A haiku is two worlds in one breath. And you have to have that sense of transition, some kind of cut. There's some kind of like leap within the haiku. But occasionally there's these rare poems. If you go back and watch Michael Dillon Welch, I can't remember the exact haiku that he read, but he talked about how, because we had a conversation about, does every haiku have to have a cut? And he said, yes, but sometimes the cut is after the end of the haiku. And so it's what it implies. And there was some kind of, I wish I could remember the actual haiku, but go back and look at that Rattlecast and find that discussion about it. And he talks about one haiku where it was what's implied about what happens next is like the transition, like the secondary space, the place we move to in our transformational journey that is the little haiku poem, is the after. And I think if you have something that's intriguing enough as a thought, that you sort of ponder it after the fact, you thinking about what was just said in this poem is enough of movement. So to me, I don't think it's necessarily that you're stuck in one place with a poem like this. It's a rare thing to pull off, like it's rare in haiku. But when you do it and it works really great. And so, like everything, like basic rules are always meant to be broken, and there's ways you can get around anything that are sort of suggestions that usually work. And I think this poem, there's enough intrigue in it to make it work. Okay, let's see. Is that anything about Mark Goodyear says, and this is a better way to put it, so thanks, Mark. Mark says, this is really about how poetry freezes the ephemeral into a form that grows old and loses its immediacy. Poems grow old and archaic, should be left alive and present in the instant. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think that's really what the concern is. And, knowing PMB, this is genuinely one of the things he thinks about at this sort of deeper metaphysical level of poetry. And I think you can see him, every poem has to have a question at the heart of it. And you can see him mulling these questions in the form of the voice of the she who's speaking. And I think that's why the poem pretty works. As Jesse A. said, yeah, I see, the poem didn't feel stagnant to me, so I think it works. But the middle loses me a little. Yeah, and we haven't really talked about the middle. I think the middle can be condensed. It goes on a little bit too far. I think the poem could be, we cut the ending or make the ending the title. And then this middle section. We love the wild swing at the whoosh of midnight. But this section right here, until we get back to her, this is what's highlighted here. I think that could be about half the length. And if we condense that, only kept what's really the most interesting, and then moved on and then ended at the cry, I think that would work as a really good poem. So I think there's a little bit, I think that's a little bit of an edit, and then it becomes a really, really successful poem. So thanks for sharing that, PMB. Let's look at the other one. Uh-oh. Sometimes Submittable does this. Let me refresh and see if that works. Okay, here we go. Submittable. Success. Okay, so his other poem from PMB is... Oh, that's interesting. So Dry Montito. Yeah. Here's an example from Dry Montito. This isn't the one Michael Dillon Welch, but I love this example. It's perfect. Dry Montito shares this haiku. And whose is that? Is that yours or is that someone else's? I'd love to know. But it's beautiful. Said a triceratops watching a falling star. And that's what we mean by the cut at the end. There's really no cut within. It's just what happens. But then the realization of what happens next and what that falling star is the cut. So we have that one world of the triceratops. It's beautiful, said a triceratops watching a falling star. That's all the one world. And then the next world is literally the new world, making the contrast and the leap from that world to the world with no dinosaurs. And that is Dry Montito. Thanks for sharing that. That is nice haiku, as Katie says. Yeah. So thanks for sharing. Perfect example of what we were talking about. Okay, let's read Heart Failure now. Heart Failure. My heart is so give up now. It's hardly like a heart at all. It's fell silent, like a friendship rambled on too long. Is there something? Am I misreading this? My heart is so give up now. It's hardly like a heart at all. It's fell silent, like a friendship rambled on too long. Heavy hangs on it like wet, left out blankets on flagging lines. I'd tighten if I could. If my fingers weren't swollen, my will resigned. My heart is no bird, cardinal even, no spot of warmth on winter snow, or buzz of dimming grim blue light seen through a solitary window. It has forgotten all my heart, where it began, what it wants, of breaking and of hope. It doesn't cry, not even where children haunt, passing meadows, stubborn grass, or the piss-stained mattress sheets. It's not fear or dressed in anger for the lies or the rubble or the grief. Now I'm at the heart of it. I think my heart, or what it was, has served me well, but will it break or even blink when things really go to hell? Yeah. Shape of Soup says, once you lock into the syntax, I get this more, but it's an awkward approach. Yeah, and it doesn't continue. I like the idea in a vacuum. My heart is so give it up now. I like that. I think that works as the first line, but then it's hard to read the second line. It's hardly like a heart at all. Or the third line, I guess. It's fell silent. Should that be it's fall silent? And because there's a stilted, if the thing works through the whole poem, if there's a sort of mode of speaking that's a little unusual, but it works through the whole poem, that's great. But if you start questioning whether or not there's just typos, and that's what I do with "it's fell silent," because it would be "it fell silent" or "it's fall silent," "it's fallen silent," or just "fallen silent." Yeah, so there's different. That verb not being conjugated right makes it feel like that the place in the other poems are typos, that where the language is a little stilted, and then first it just, and so the whole thing, you sort of start doubting the poem and doubting the poet, and that's just not a good place to be when you're trying to have a real intimate connection with the poet, and they took their time and showed me something important here is the feeling you want to have. And so so I think I would clean that up, and I think I just don't know if it's just a typo or not. But my heart is so give it up now, it's hardly like a heart at all. It's fallen silent. I think it should say like a friendship rambled on too long. So I like that with the edit, assuming that's just a typo. I like that stanza. Heavy hangs on it like a wet. Left out blankets. Here's a comma interesting. We had no missing commas. This is a comma I would not include. I think wet left out blankets on flagging lines reads through perfectly fine without the comma. So I would cut that one. And I like it. I like heavy hangs on it like wet left out blankets on flagging lines. That's nice. I'd tighten if I could. My fingers weren't swollen. My will resigned. And as people are talking about, we have the rhyme scheme slightly established. It's not, I mean, the all and long are so far apart, but they're sort of there too. And the lines resigned, snow window, it gets more strong as the poem goes on, that rhyme scheme. Morgan Feeney suggests, and I think this is good, wet blankets left out on flagging lines is better. Like wet blankets left out on flagging lines. Yeah, the rhythm of that works better. Yeah. As David S. says, wet is the noun, not an adjective. And yeah, that's the way it's written now. And I think it works better being a little ambiguous as to how to read it. And it reads more smoothly. Because the, heavy hangs on it like wet is a really nice expression, but it's unusual. And you don't, it's sort of, when you glide past it, it gets a little confusing, I think. If you ended the sentence there, I think leaving it like a noun would work really well, because you get just that moment, that split second to ponder it. But because you don't, and the line continues, I don't think it works as well. And therefore, I think it works better if you want to continue the image. I wouldn't mind just ending the sentence there. But if you want to continue the image onto this other nice image, like the simile, left out blankets on flagging lines, if you want to keep that image, having no comma allows it to sort of be there as like a ghost noun, and you get to sort of experience it a little bit without it being confusing, because it's still working as an adjective. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. But I'd tighten it if I could. I'd tighten if I could. If my fingers weren't swollen, my will resigned. My heart is no bird, cardinal even, no spot of warmth on winter snow, or buzz of dimming grim blue light seen through a solitary window. And so again, I do like the rhymes here. There's a stilted kind of nature to both the voice and the rhyme. It reminds me of Emily Dickinson, the way the rhymes are sort of surprising and not what you expect. I think that part works well. The buzz of dimming grim blue light. I'm not a fan of this dimming grim blue light phrase. I think grim blue light works, but the dimming grim is a little too much. I'd find, too much detail, maybe drop one detail, as a Sarah Rashid Khan is saying right now. Yeah, exactly. So that's a line that I would edit. It has forgotten all, my heart, where it began, what it wants, of breaking and of hope. It doesn't cry. I would like a full stop here, maybe, too, just a pause with a period. It doesn't cry, not even where children haunt. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, is it just me, or do I want other words for heart than heart? More medical terms, maybe. The metaphysical heart reference is maybe too strong. Make it more literal, more valves and tachycardia. Yeah. It is the similar type thing. If we, I was trying to explain in referencing the Li Young Lee book, which I think it was Kimberly who brought up, If you can if you make a word like that, like love or heart, like a mantra, like you're coming back to it and sort of redefining it and changing it, it can still work. But if you're sort of casually dropping it and standing in for something, it doesn't. And I think this poem sort of, the other one I think worked a little better. This one walks the line between it a little more closely. And maybe I would either, it's one of those like uncanny valley things where if you have, a little bit of it or a lot of it, but if you have just the wrong amount, it doesn't quite build up, and it detracts. And so I think maybe there's a little too much of that kind of abstraction here. Passing meadows, stubborn grass, or the piss-stained mattress sheets. It is not fear or dressed in anger for the lies, the rubble, or the grief. And I think that having fear and anger and lies and grief, it's a lot of abstraction wanting me to come back to a more concreteness, because the emotions live in concrete things, and we get too much labeling in this little section. And to me, I think the poem loses a little bit of its energy there because of it. Now I'm at the heart of it. I think my heart, or what it was, has served me well, but will it break or even blink when things really go to hell? And for me, we have where's the well and hell rhyme. So we take the rhyme and push it deeper. I think like this kind of stanza works better in a shorter poem, but I think it doesn't feel rewarding enough to me to work in a poem, that we've been on the journey a little bit longer. So I don't know. I think I guess it's too pat of an ending. Like it feels like the way the final couplet of a sonnet clicks a little bit too self-consciously, a little bit too pre-planned. It doesn't feel like an authentic journey as far as where we were going. So I would suggest, in addition to sticking with a little bit more concrete language toward the end, where we get into what I love. I haven't really said. I love the intimacy and the feel of that. There's a one of my favorite poems, and Bukowski is an awful human being, but his some of his poems are so deeply intimate. The Bluebird poem is the one that always comes to mind. It's just he's speaking so purely from his heart that it's really, really moving. And that the fact that all that sort of gruff jerk posturing is like a front on this tender heart that he has inside in that Bluebird poem. That sort of feeling, which when Bukowski is really working, really works, and it makes him great. That is the sense I get for a lot of this poem. So my heart is no bird. I kind of feel like that. Cardinal even, no spot of warmth on winter snow. Great line, and great use of that image too. But there's a real, just an authenticity to that statement. My heart is no bird. You can feel the realness there. I think that's a really great line. And running toward this feeling, toward this authentic experience that's expressed in this middle section, and pushing past the preconceived sort of easy ending into something even more surprising, I think would work well. Yeah. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Trent says, yes. Oh, first Rachel says, this may be a personal bias against the word, but piss stain doesn't fit with the rest of the tone. And then Kimberly Gibson Trent says, Rachel, I almost like the piss stain because they are more concrete and give some good complication with negative tone. Yeah. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson Trent says, could be a stronger connection with the heart and bird wings beating. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like the direction to go. To keep on, to keep. I really feel like the heart of the poem, no pun intended, is with this line, like the honest authenticity of this statement. And then I do like the mattresses and where we go here. I just feel like the ending is too pat, I guess, and I think it loses that sense of that, really seeking for an answer, authenticity of voice, Let's see. MS Ashburn says, Tragedy of the Leaves is my favorite Bukowski poem. I don't know that one. Bukowski, Tragedy of the Leaves. If it's short, I'll read it, because I'm sure we've read the Bluebird before. Yeah, well, let's read it. This is courtesy of genius.com, apparently. Well, thank you, Genius. Let's read this Bukowski, and just listen to the authenticity of it, which I'm sure is represented here. It's one of those websites with way too many pop-ups. That's annoying. And I didn't highlight this text. So anyway, we'll read it anyway. This is The Tragedy of Leaves. I awakened to dryness and the ferns were dead. The potted plants yellow as corn. Oh, that's really annoying. Hang on, I just can't do it. There's too many things popping. Why do they... I guess this is a lyrics website. But why... let's see. Just having poetry with pop-ups and stuff is so obnoxious. Here we go. This is much better. This is somebody who loves poetry formatting this from poeticious.com. And there are ads, but they're not as obnoxious. Okay, here we go. The Tragedy of the Leaves. The Tragedy of the Leaves. I awakened to dryness and the ferns were dead. The potted plants yellow as corn. After I praise them, they do that. No! Sorry. Okay, anyway. Why? I know, you're making money. Everyone's got to eat. Okay. The Tragedy of the Leaves. I can't get away. I awakened to dryness and the ferns were dead. The potted plants yellow as corn. My woman was gone, and the bottles, empty bottles like bled corpses, surround me with their uselessness. The sun was still good, though, and my landlady's note cracked in fine and undemanding yellowness. What was needed now was a good comedian, ancient style, a gesture with jokes upon absurd pain. Pain is absurd because it exists, nothing more. I shaved carefully with an old razor. The man who had once been young and said to have genius, but that's the tragedy of the leaves, the dead ferns, the dead plants. And I walked into a dark hall where the landlady stood, excreting in final, sending me to hell, waving her fat, sweaty arms and screaming for rent because the world has failed us both. Yeah, so that's another great poem. And it's the, because the world has failed us both. You know, what's great with just Bukowski is that glimmer of the heart underneath the poem. Like you only see this like gruff, obnoxious person that you wouldn't want to have dinner with. But and the other poet that's exactly like this now is Mather Schneider. You know, he's such a curmudgeonly, grumpy person, but he has a heart of gold, and he kind of hates himself for it. And that's Bukowski and Mather too. And but anyway, but you can see that come through in Bukowski, and I think that's the thing to cultivate and push more into your poem. Okay. Whew. Oh, we've been talking about that a lot, so let's move on. I just get caught up. I love talking about poems. Okay. We have to do some older poems in the queue, but thanks for sharing this, PMB. Hope these were helpful as always. In the true Iowa style, he did not say anything, although he's been here the whole time. So thanks. And you don't have, I mean, I don't care what you say. This is all for you. You know, for reading your poems, we're here to help you. So if you want to talk about your opinion, you know, defend your poem, and that's helpful, feel free. If you want to just listen, that's great too. Tends to be better if you just listen. Okay. Okay. Open Eyes, Rest Fears. The poet, I should say, is Mert Özel from Istanbul. So that's fun. Any general questions? No general questions, just two poems here. Let's take a look. Open Eyes, Rest Fears. Here we go. Perfect fit clothes, unnoticed, just like skin, drifting through the world with no walls, no sin, transparent, unburdened, you cease to resist. A harmony where self blends into the world's fabric. 1. Sleepless beneath the night, these leaves with withered hands cling to their branches, caught in life's demands. With empty palms, nourishing planted structures, drifting, ever drifts, never satisfied nor surprised. Open eyes, rest fears. Morning's lessons have just begun in a place where stimulus intertwines, marching towards the order. It's time to align. A half-felt life, a muted sigh, a challenge to see the most raucous light, too soft to catch, too brief to grasp, like shadows slipping past the light. Night again blinks constantly, then puke the morning's tears, until a day after and a day after that. 2. At the confession of nature's locks, the monster appears, hangs selves, hides lores. Within the tombs it hid, thirst for acts, leaks, cheerful feeds on what remains. Craves delusions within fresh, misted minds, has many ways to waken and deceptive sides. Makes amorphous walls a sheltering tomb, twists them numb to their own thoughts. Through chaos they drift, then harden as stone, questioning only what they miss. Dismissed like never born, watching the unreal, wasting what concluded real, fixated on undeserving, preserving, then withering. Old eyes overlooked the dreams at their feet. Just a thought, do I dare? Do I lie and retreat? Confronting the monster, mirroring the shifting core, finding grasping tight, refute the branches all the more. Let me see how long this is. Okay. 3. Chased attentions hide from sight. The gap awakens with torn minds. Must we loosen to soar heart's true light? Feel for all that we can give is out of sight. Letting go. What a naked path to take. What we try to access makes us escape. What once was distant now feels innate. Thus we welcome what has slipped time. Craving what cannot be grasped or owned, drawn to minds that have let all else go. Some mystery, untouchable, nameless, elusive form, simply for appearing absences, nothing more. As leaves released to meet, what is out of time? Shine when lights stop to identify. Yeah, as Desi Cochran says, I'm afraid the internet has ruined my attention span. Sarah Rashid Khan says, I haven't caught anything. No line has grabbed me back into the poem just yet. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson Trent says, the Do I Dare, which is a proof rock echo. And I was already thinking about bringing up proof rock. So as Mary Dean Carter says, I'm confused. It seems to get more obscure as it goes. And the problem is we aren't grounded enough. And I was going to pull up proof rock, actually. That was my plan as I was reading and sort of having trouble following, too. Because it does have that reference to proof rock. And if we pull up the poem, you can see the difference in how the speaker is in a setting is established. And that's what makes the meanderings into the philosophical and the poetic lines and things, that's what makes it actually work. So let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through the certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. So you have this whole, scene of the city street, and you and I are going. So he's taking us on a journey through these empty streets, and so we know where we are. We know who's speaking. There's an I, and he's saying, let us go then, you and I. And then we have the image. So that's all laid out before us. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Who? Do not ask. What is it? Let us go and make our visit. So you and I are going to make a visit here. And then we come through the streets. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools it stained in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. So this whole thing is just a wonderful description of the fog. And everything here are sonnets too linked together. And so, but because we have the scene established, we're allowed to take these sort of sweeping departures that happen throughout the poem because we sort of know what's going on. And knowing what's going on is just so important. And in this poem that we're looking at, Open Eyes, Rest Fears, we don't have that same sense. Who is sleepless beneath the night? These leaves with withered hands cling to their branches, caught in life's soft demands. With empty palms nourishing planted structures, drifting, ever adrift, never satisfied nor surprised. Like, who is never? The branches are never satisfied. Who's watching the branches? Where are we? That stuff is not clear. All we have is this sort of floating, nebulous, it's a sleepless night and there's leaves outside, but we don't get a sense of who the I is or why it's important, And so having that established is what lets you drift off into deeper musings, And so we end up just lost in this poem without a sense of that grounding. And so what we need to establish up front is the actual scene, the actual situation, the context. Then we can move through and enjoy the music of the poem. And the strength of the poem is the music. There's nice, it expands and shifts. It's not a regular meter. It's true free verse because it's verse, but then it frees itself and goes in all sorts of directions. But the rhyme scheme holds it through. And so that part is pleasing, but we all feel lost. I'm confused, I'm lost. That's what all the notes say, because nothing is established. We don't know where we are. So the poem ends up being the sort of nebulous words with nowhere to put them. And and it does get more obscure as it continues, as Nancy Tunnell says, but we never had a sense of where we were. Whereas if you look at any of Eliot poems, Eliot's poems always have a sense of placing the subject, and we get a sense of like what the scene is that we're building and entering into. And in order to really connect with the scene, which is what poetry is, it's like creating this magical space that we can enter through the words. You have to have a sense of what that scene, what that place is. And we don't, so we all feel lost. And as Jesse says, I wish this were descriptive, like in the Proof Rock, you get the sawdust restaurant with the oyster shells. I don't want to read all of Proof Rock because it's a pretty long poem, but he drifts out into more philosophical musings, but then always returns to some grounding part of a scene, so you never feel lost. You're always tethered to the reality he's created, and that's really what's missing in this poem. And if you focus on that and rewrite it with some touchstones back to reality, I think the poem would work a lot better and actually connect and resonate with us. Otherwise, we're just lost and don't really know what's going on. It's hard to follow. The Shape of Soup says, I believe there is a there, but the fog is, well, very foggy, and that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Okay, so let's read the other poem, which is much shorter. This is Green Servant. Green servant yearned for immortality's kiss, to live, love, hate, in the world's eternal bliss. Desired much, sought world's recreation, redesigned order, chaos, redefinition. Intentions grand, longing for impossible, yearned for things reality deemed implausible, rejected dreams in the realm of possibility, unaware of the universe, galaxy's capacity. Only himself, in isolated affinity, yet even that, designed by green servant as impossibility, no room for possibilities of his strife, fierce enemy of reality called life. And again, Dry Montillo says, I like the texture of this language. I feel like I'm lying on a soft carpet looking at densely patterned wallpaper. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I do like that too. That's the real beauty of it, is in the music of that and the density of the language, the texture of it. That's a great way to put it. But again, it's really hard to connect with the abstraction. It's too abstract for me. Ali Rowland, this is a good example of too many abstract nouns together. Emily Arnold Fernandez says, Green Servant makes me think of the Green Man in British myth. This may be a riddle. So for this one, the same thing applies. We just don't have a sense of this green servant actually existing in space. We have a lot of abstraction, a lot of nouns as labels for concepts, and nothing really emerges from that. As Clayton Starr says, a better title might help, but really just focus on setting scene and making images that we can connect to. Because you connect emotionally. We don't connect emotionally through labels of those emotions. We connect through scenes and through concrete objects, because those let us enter scenes and enter the body of the speaker of the poem. And so, Green Servant yearned for immortality's kiss. Instead of saying to live, love, hate, in the world's eternal bliss, where can you go to actually situate that immortality's kiss, or situate that green servant within a place? We had a glimmer of that in the last poem with that opening out the window in the sleepless night, but we need a lot more of that. And here, if green servant was put in a place, then we could start to connect with it and have keep touching back to that. Desired much, sought world's recreation, redesigned order, chaos redefinition. So I mean, it gets hard to even parse when it's that many abstractions piled up. It's sort of like a heap of ideas that you can't really see what the structure is. Intentions grand, longing for impossible, yearned for things reality deemed implausible. Like, we're just drifting out into this. Like, what does that actually mean? Yearn for things reality deemed like, what specifically is being, like, what are the grand intentions? Rejected dreams. Like, who's rejecting the dreams? The reality of the realm of possibility. Unaware of the universe, galaxy's complexity. Like how so? Like nothing is shown. It's all told. Even though the even though there's great music to the language and complexity to the syntax, which is nice, it still just doesn't. It's really hard to connect with. We need more concrete things. Yeah, less abstraction, and that's really if you look at any of the poets, that you probably admire. Just look for the concrete use of language and setting it in objects and subjects into the poem, so we know where we are, and you'll see that everywhere because that's a necessary function really to make something connect. Okay, let's move on to another poet. It's already 1:55. We only done 2 poets. I've done a terrible job today. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's see. Next up, we're going to skip Partha Sarkar because Partha's in there so much. And like I say, like once a year is good. There's no official rule, but like, try not to submit too many poems, too regular. Like wait till I guess the better thing is like wait until we've gone over a poem to send more poems. Okay. So instead, let's look at the next poet. Morgan Martin is here. So Morgan Martin from Michigan. And he questions, no questions, just the poem. So Gardens of Recovery. I think it's just one poem too. That's a 2-pager, but relatively big spacing. So we'll go here. Gardens of Recovery. If I could visit my younger self, I would return to the day I stopped laughing. The weight of suffering began to settle in, and innocence, my last shield against a harsh word, was lost too soon. My adolescence turned me a deep navy blue, while others bloomed into vibrant flowers. I stayed blue until I turned gray, feeling like heavy clouds, raindrops seeping from every crack, ready for a thunderstorm at any moment. Frequent thunderstorms followed. Lightning flashed with my sharp tongue. Thunder shook me, and I found relief only after the storm. Sometimes the storms flooded my room, making it hard to leave my lifeboat, a full-size mattress with 2 pillows. I thought if I could just reach the door, let the water out, and the rescue crews in, I would be saved. But it was my storm flooding the room. Why did I need rescuing? Why couldn't I swim out of myself? How many rescues did I deserve? Didn't they know there are people really drowning? 7 rescues later, I was still gray, and the clock ticked on. Then I joined a group of flowers, some like me, gray, and others, roses, violets, and marigolds, learning to thrive through life's rains. I watched my new companions navigate their path, and I learned to grow too. My gray brightened to soft yellow, and a garden began to bloom within me. The garden started with a few flowers, grew tall over 3 years, adorned the delicate foliage. Occasional gray brings rain that feeds the flowers, and when yellow returns, they stretch inside me, tickling my insides. Like an opal, I now reflect a spectrum of colors. My garden grows, a haven for butterflies to dance in the rain and bask in the sun. The weight of suffering lightened. I became a child again in my garden, frolicking in daisies and sitting under the lilac tree. The flowers that grow inside me, show that something beautiful can come from me. So that's the poem. And I do, as somebody said, there's some nice lines and some good character development. Kimberly Gibson-Tran says, I like some of the character development we're getting in the first stanza, but it does get hard to follow. I want to pin the navy blue on a uniform or something concrete. Elizabeth Brown says, why couldn't I swim out of myself is nice. Tickling my inside, says Emmy Arnold Fernandez. Such a great image as the flowers grow inside. And then Hemet Malik says, my main point is going to be condensing would help. I think there's a nice, you can feel the meaning behind the poem. There's, a sense that this poem has a reason to be written, which is, among the first steps to making a real poem. You have to have some kind of urge to write it, some kind of question to express, some kind of mystery to explore. And I think that's doing that. And, but it goes on too long and sort of summarizes itself too much, Yeah. Yeah, Sharon Friend says, I liked it in the beginning, but then too much, and I love some kind of surprise. Yeah. Yeah, so let's look at it a little more closely. Gardens of Recovery. And that's a sort of a, I think it's not a great title because it gives away the overarching metaphor a little too soon. And it sort of just ends up being a repetition. So I think it may be a better title that's more surprising. As Shape of Soup says, less words, more visceral words. And Winston Munn says, also felt like it was walking on the edge of cliche. Yeah. So if I could visit my younger self, I would return to the day I stopped laughing. So that's a really great opening. We know there's a speaker. The speaker is set in the present tense, looking back at the past younger self. And then I would return to the day I stopped laughing is a really strong, it's one of those, it's like a cliffhanger of a line. Like, I want to know about the day you stopped laughing. Why would you stop laughing? And that's very significant. And so it makes you want to read the rest of the story. So it's a really great opening. The weight of suffering began to settle in. The innocence, my last shield against a harsh world, was lost too soon. My adolescence turned me, and there's a real. We keep talking about abstraction in today's episode, and there's a real way that's abstracting and summarizing in these two lines, where we want to move right into more detail. And my adolescence turned me a deep navy blue, while others bloomed into vibrant flowers. That. If we cut these two lines and we just go from the stop laughing to this, the poem works and stays strong, And so I would do that. There's too much abstraction in these lines. And that's what we get. We get, it's interesting setting up this metaphor of the garden having to recover. I think it works well, and there's a sense of some meaning behind that. But, there's too much explanation for what we're exploring. And that's kind of journalistic, diaristic, in the way that it explains itself as it's coming to its own discoveries. You want to have images in the story, the metaphor and the symbolism of whatever you're telling, and you're setting up this space that you're inviting us in to look around. You want that to be telling the story and not like a narrator kind of telling us what to make of it. And there's a little too much of that. So we enter into it, we get the metaphor, but there's too much telling about the metaphor. And that's what happens in lines 3 and 4, I mean. And that happens throughout the poem. So we get this idea, this overarching metaphor, extended metaphor is entered and starts to be developed in a nice way, but there's too much summarizing. It goes on too long. As Maria Alberg says, that great opening made me want to know the specifics of the day, the younger self. Why did that younger self stop laughing, and why would the speaker want to relive it? And that's, the reason it works really well as a first opening is we want to know why you stopped laughing. And we want to keep reading because we expect to get to hear that story. And then eventually we don't. And that's why the poem leaves us, so condensing it and getting to that story more is what we really want as readers, I think. Yes, Kimberly Gibson Trans says in all caps, tell me your personal injuries. Who hurt you? What secret revenge you wrought? I want the dirty details. And we do. We want to learn a lesson from your story. Yeah. Okay. I stayed blue until I turned gray, feeling like heavy clouds, raindrops seeping from every crack, ready for a thunderstorm at any moment. So those are nice descriptions of, as we're extending the metaphor, we're bringing in concrete details about it, and we can enter into that. We already know that this is a metaphor, and we really, as humans, we think in metaphor. That's the way we process things. And, it's an instrument of perception, as Neil Postman said. And so we're really comfortable with an extended metaphor, entering that, like this is like this, and then we can just talk about the symbol and not have to keep saying that it's about, it's really about whatever deeper thing it's about. We can live within the metaphor, and I think maybe you could say that the issue of this poem and what makes it both too long and less compelling than it could be is that we don't live inside the metaphor for most of the poem. We go in the metaphor and then come back out to be told about the metaphor. Yeah. So anyway, lightning flashed with my sharp tongue. Thunder shook me. I think that's enough. I think that's what we can say with this poem. So we just want to see that, just stay direct with images and tell the story. And there's a real story here that we want to hear. So don't be afraid to let it out, but don't be summarizing. If you're going to set up this metaphor, just tell us that and let us live in it. I hope that makes sense. But we're going to move on to the next poet because I want to make sure we get to at least a few today. Okay, and that was Morgan Martin again from Michigan, I believe. Next up, we have Shabnam Hannah Shajir from India. No general questions, just a collection of broken dreams, this is called. Okay. Stardust in our hearts. Here we go. Stardust in our hearts. We are made of stardust, they once said, or said once, our veins flowing with billions of ages of fire, repressed forever in the name of civilization. I hope we break free and let our veins sing and sync with the starry night. As I brush my fingers against yours, I swear I can feel it in the blood pumping in the pulse of your wrists, roaring through the night, soaring with each touch of your fingers trace stars. Each touch, your fingers trace stars along my arm, leg, heart. And I'm alive in your arms, a torrential downpour of two bright sparks in your heart, in the whisper of your voice. Yeah. So, and then we have another poem too. Look at how it's interesting. There's like the lack of punctuation would work, except for it's got these words that are capitalized. And they really, if you're going to do it this way, just put that down in the next line. I'm not sure why that's up there, but I tripped over it a few times. It's a little strange to read. Otherwise, the way one line reveals itself forever, and there's kind of a bit of implied punctuation in a stanza break, it kind of works. So I think that's okay as long as you fix that up. But in general, though, this is another poem that it's all the stuff we always talk about, which is specific details, tell the story, don't be abstract, concrete, set up a place, tell what's actually going on. Like, we want details. We want to enter a narrative. It's still storytelling. And so there's a lot of sort of nice lines and images, but don't tell what's really going on. So Stardust in our hearts, it sounds nice, but what does that really mean? And we get into the cliche of hearts that we talk about a lot. We are made of stardust, okay. They said once, our veins flowing with billions of ages of fire. I like the billions of ages of fire. I think that's a nice way to put it, actually. Repressed forever in the name of civilization. I'm not sure what that means, repressed forever, but we're talking about an abstraction too, so it's not something we're connecting with. But I'm not sure why it's repressed forever in the name of civilization either. I'm not sure where that logically makes sense. I hope we break free and let our veins sing and sync with the starry night. So there's nice line, nice music to that line, that stanza. As I brush my fingers against yours, I swear I can feel the blood pumping. Blood pumping is a cliched phrase, in the pulse of your wrists. And so we introduce in the third stanza this you that suddenly we're talking to, and Kimberly Gibson transputs it this way, and this is a good way to put it. Some nice sensory details. The challenge with these is to keep them strange, to mimic the electric touch of new love. Yeah, that's great. Good point. And Shape of Soup says surface and cliche, but I think there's something worth developing here. I agree too. There's a nice sense of music and rhythm. There's a good use of language in this poem. It's just it stays too abstract. And even if you have a poem that talks about things that are sort of distant, like Stardust and Starry Nights and things like that, there's still a way that you can make it concrete and vivid, without sticking in that abstraction so long that we don't get the story. And that's the problem. We don't get the story, so we feel like shrugging, kind of. Roaring through the night, soaring, so the roaring, soaring, it's just sort of melodramatic, and they're vague, and we want really specific details. About, are we literally flying through the nights? I don't know. Your fingers trace stars along, and we get stars again. There's so much of that along my arm, leg, heart, and I am alive in your arms. A torrential downpour of two bright sparks in your heart, in the whisper of your voice. One of the things too that comes to mind in this is a great poem as a personal poem, as a poem that you might want to give to your lover, your significant other. And I think that would really work on that level. It's just that you have to find a way to make us care about the story, because it's sort of a general story that everyone's experienced kind of love, or most people have, hopefully. And it's very private to you in the telling, and you're not telling us anything unique or broad about the story. So focus on unique details, things that are unusual, and that brings us in to connect with your specific story, rather than keeping distant and having it be a sort of generalized theme, because generalization doesn't really connect with us. And as Cindy Gunterman says, give it to the person you wrote it for, and they'll really appreciate it. And that's why I really always want to make this distinction of private poems have real value. Like, instead of giving them a card or something, write this poem in and give them that, on whatever, your anniversary or something. And that's really valuable. And there's nothing wrong with it, that being the place where the poem lives. And that's the function that the poem provides. As Sheba Soup says, who is your audience? And if your audience is the one person, great. But if the audience is anybody coming across this poem that you're trying to connect with, we have to connect with your actual story and the actual details of things that are going on, and creating a space that we can enter and feel our way through. And that's not happening here with the abstraction. So let's take a look at the other poem too. There's a good suggestion by Shauna Evaningo Sanders. She says, perhaps research more about the science of stars to help create unique metaphors and descriptions. And that's the way to make it concrete too. If you don't want to tell your specific story and the details there, get really specific and detailed about stars themselves, or atmospheric phenomenon, or just the layers of that, or who knows, like anything you can get. We need specificity in order to connect. Abstraction and distance don't connect, and that's really just a central thing you have to understand when you're early on in writing. Okay, next up is Vampire. Longing sucks my blood, it drinks me dry, leaving me gasping, exhausted with no voice. Longing reaches out at me standing there, its cold, dark fingers against my too pale throat. Longing choked me with a grip of misery and pain of anticipation of things never to be, promising sweet nothings. Lies filled my ears. I have longed too long and longed for too much, that I stand now a hollow husk of myself. I stare in the mirror. I do not really know who stares back. Yeah, and again... Yeah. Morgan Feeney says, again, abstraction, lack of clarity. Yeah, lack of specificity. Listen One says, check out Dead Stars by Ada Limon. And Kimberly Gibson Tran beat me to the best line. I think there's a really great run in this poem where, let me find it again. It is, lies filling my ears. I have longed too long and longed for too much. That's a beautiful line. I have longed too long and longed for too much. Like, that is like, what you're really writing toward when you're writing are those surprising lines that come out. And the trick of being a great poet is to allow yourself to be receptive to those lines and to create like a space where those lines can emerge spontaneously from you. And that's just a great line. Yeah. Hollow Husk is also good. Yeah. Jesse A says, sounds nice and nice lines in here, but it does feel too abstract. Yeah, it's really nicely woven music to the speech. There's a nice rhythm to it, but it's too abstract to connect. Yeah, so much potential here, says Jesse A. Let's take a look at that poem. It's another poem I don't know. Dead Stars by Ada Limon. And it might be too long to read, but let's try it out. This is courtesy of poets.org, and we'll see if we'll see how Ada uses specific details talking about stars here. And even at 2 poets.org, like if you go to Rattle, there will never be pop-ups on rattle.com. I promise. Anyway. Even a newsletter sign up, just let it be. Okay. Dead Stars. Out here, there's a bowing, even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. So see, here we get the trees are bowing, and winter has an icy hand at the back of all of us. It's not just an icy hand, but it's the back of all of us. So it's very concrete. You can feel that for a second. So there you go, with those specific details, even though we're talking about big abstract concepts or, and they're not on our human scale. And so it makes it more difficult to talk about with specificity. And yet, there we go with some specific detail to start out. Out here, there's a bowing, even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. Black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute it's almost another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. Oh, I do remember this poem, yeah. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash. See, we're taking out the trash, rolling the containers of a song of suburban thunder. What a line. But how specific that is. Like, we're not just talking about the stars. Like, you can imagine these days a nest of trying or something, and then talking about stars and Orion and stuff like that. But no, we point out the stars. So we are there. There's me and someone else, and then as we take out the trash, the rolling container's a song of suburban thunder. I mean, that is so great. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bin until you say, man, we should really learn some new constellations. And it's true, we keep forgetting about Antlia, Centaurus, Draco, Lacerta, Hydra, Lyra, Lynx. But mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust, and I wish I could reclaim the rising. To lean in the spotlight of streetlight with you, toward what's larger within us, towards how we were born. Look, we are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What if we stood up with our synapses and flush and said no, no to the rising tides? Stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, of the land? What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others, for Earth, if we declared a clean night, if we stopped being terrified, if we launched our demands into the sky, made ourselves so big people could point to us with arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out after all this is over? So yeah, and that was from The Carrying by Ada Limon. And yeah, and so notice, I mean, this is just the stuff we've been pointing out all. We have abstraction. Like, there's a lot of stuff in here toward the end, but mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust, and I wish I could to reclaim the rising, to lean in the spotlight of the streetlight with you. But here. Look, we are not on spectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more? If the poem just said that, it wouldn't work. It would be boring. We would not connect with it. It would be too vague and unspecific. And we wouldn't feel anything from it. The whole reason we do, and Ada Limon knows this, is because of that line, where we're going out, we're taking the trash out, looking at horizon. The rolling container is a song of suburban thunder. It's a beautiful description of that concrete detail, and that's really all we need to make all the other abstractions work. And then, of course, she knows that that's like the structure that makes the poem be able to function. And so she comes back to it at the end. After some abstraction, all those questions, she comes back to people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out after all this is over. And so it becomes a poem imagining us through the next, the next supernova. And I saw a really fascinating thing. I think it was Elon Musk, actually, but he said that we've lived through 2 supernovas, and the expected lifespan of the universe is 4 supernovas, so that we are halfway through the life of the universe, as measured by the times you will have gone through a supernova. And that's what she's talking about here, that at some point there will be another, and who will be the next life? And hopefully we can live up to that, being in the sky. So that's a beautiful poem by Ada Limon, but look at the way the concrete detail makes it work. Okay. And thanks to Ada and for poets.org for sharing that. So that's so concrete specificity is really the key. Okay. And here we go. Okay, well, that's going to wrap up the show for tonight. Are we really believing anything Elon Musk says? Jesus, says Morgan Feeney. Yeah. Elon knows scientific things. I mean, you can not like him, and you can still acknowledge the fact that he knows some things. Okay. Anyway, let's move on, and that's going to wrap up the show for today. Thanks, everybody, for participating. I hope this was helpful. Now, I do want to remind everybody that the Poetry Space has dropped today. It's the second half of our episode on political poems. So there's a 2-parter on the Poetry Space. Find that. That's Katie Dozier's podcast. We talk about a lot of Poetry Spawn poems in there, how political poems works and why they don't often. And that's a really important thing about that. So check that out. Also, this week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be Lee Young Lee, as we already mentioned before. It's Mother's Day in the U.S., and Lee Young Lee has a new book out, an anthology of his mother poems. and it's Ask My Mother. I Asked My Mother to Sing. So we're going to read from there and talk about his mother and his experience growing up and all that happened, along with some other poems too from The Invention of the Darling, which we're talking about too. Going to be a great episode with Lee Young Lee. The prompt for this week was to write a poem about, let me get the phrasing right. It was to write a poem about unrequited love for something other than a human. That's how we phrase it. So unrequited love, but something not a human. So it can be an inanimate object, something else, who knows what, a concept. There are a lot of places you can go with that. Off the beaten path. Should make for really fun poems. That's your prompt for this week. Your guest is Lee Young Lee. That's Rattlecast 292, May 11th, Sunday. The regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.